morning, Abby, it's Monday, and I am aware that by the time I actually get this video released, it will be past Christmas, but today at school was Festive Friday, and I am too lazy to change my clothes just to make this video, so, Merry Christmas! Today we're going to be looking at the Reckoners Trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. The Reckoners Trilogy is a young adult, action, superhero, sci-fi, fantasy, something book series consisting of 3 books: Steelheart, Firefight, and Calamity. The basic premise is that this weird red thing has appeared in the sky. Is it a star? Is it a comet? Is it an alien spaceship? Who knows? Anyway, it's called Calamity, and it's infusing people with superpowers. These newly powered people become known as epics, but unfortunately, none of them are superheroes. Basically, when you use the epic powers, you just turn evil. The books refer to the epic's compulsion to do bad things as the darkness, and it's described as a combination of being extremely irritated by the most minor inconveniences, and you're aware that your actions have consequences, you just don't care. As a result, the epics feel completely free to just go around murdering and stealing from people and all kinds of, bad stuff. The government tries in vain to stop the epics, but eventually the epics are legally reclassified as not people, but natural disasters. The government will clean up after their actions, but they're not going to actively try and punish the epics for them. As you can imagine, from there, it was not very difficult for the epics to start taking over the government. As a result, the United States of America have been renamed to the Fractured States of America. Just letting you know, the names in these books are just amazing. Like, especially the names on the epics. Like, I don't have time to get into them, but, you remember that dude Taserface from Guardians of the Galaxy 2? I was legit expecting him to show up at some point in this book. They're that bad. Our story takes place in what used to be Chicago, where a tyrannical epic named Steelheart has taken over. Steelheart is impervious to pretty much all damage, and he can turn things around him to steel. Hence the name. Most people have assumed that he's basically immortal. Every epic is supposed to have a weakness that nullifies their powers, but most people just assumed that Steelheart just didn't have one. But he does, and there's only one person alive who might have even a chance of figuring it out. The day Steelheart took over Chicago, a man accidentally shot him while trying to aim for someone else, and Steelheart bled. Steelheart immediately murdered the man and everyone who witnessed this and blocked off all access to the area where this occurred. He even murdered the rescue workers who had come to save innocent bystanders. Steelheart thought that he murdered everyone who saw this incident, but he missed one person. The man who shot him had a son about 8 years old who managed to escape. His name is David Charleston, and he wants revenge. Cut to 10 years later. Steelheart has turned the entire city of Chicago into steel, the buildings, the streets, pretty much everything but the people, and renamed it New Chicago. And as I said, the names in this are just spectacular. I think they actually mentioned at one point that the new version of New Jersey is literally called New New Jersey. Why? David is now 18, and he has spent his entire life researching epics and how their powers work and trying to gather information on how to take down Steelheart. He hears of an organization called the Reckoners who go around the world killing epics, and that sounds like a fantastic time to David, so he sets out to join them. David and the ragtag group of assassins spend the first book trying to take down Steelheart. In the second book, they travel to New York City, which is now called Babylon Restored for some reason, to hunt down a woman named Regalia, and the third book takes place in Atlanta, which is now called Ildifia. Here's the thing. I have to acknowledge that these books have a really cool concept behind them and a lot of really cool characters and settings. There is a reason why I started reading them in the first place and why I stuck with them all the way to the end, even though I was suffering and in misery. But the way that this series executes many of its ideas are just... I know that this may not be the most popular opinion, but I'm just going to come out and say it. Steelheart is the single most boring and frustrating book I have ever read in my entire life. It's even worse than A Whole New World, because at least that book is a twist on a story that I already know, so I can at least get a little enjoyment value out of seeing these characters that I know so well in a different setting. Steelheart is just watching a bunch of admittedly cool characters wandering around an admittedly cool setting while doing absolutely nothing for like 400 pages. And despite my affection for the things I just named, it gets old really fast. It has a really strong introduction and a really strong ending, I will give it that, but like, all the stuff in between, I literally can't even accurately describe the plot of the book to you because I was so darn bored. Like, literally, I'm gonna try and say what happened in the book right now. David went to the place and joined the people, and they crawled around, like, in the metal underground a lot, and then they went to, like, an underground bank at some point, and then the ending happened. That's literally all I remember about that 400-page novel. Like, it's that bad. The second book is noticeably better, partly just because the writing has improved in a way that I literally can't even describe to you. It's just a lot more interesting. But it also has what I consider to be the most interesting setting of the three books. What used to be New York and is now called Babylon Restored, or sometimes Babalar. It's, like, really unclear, like, if one of those is, like, a nickname or if the city just has two names. Oh, by the way, this series absolutely hates explaining things to its audience, but, like, I'm gonna get to that. The epic who leads the city is called Regalia, and she has water powers, so the entire city is just flooded with water, like, to the point where it's, like, sinking most of the skyscrapers, and the skyscrapers that are still there, people have, like, pitched tents on top of them, and, like, they've got bridges going across the rooftops. In addition, pretty much everything in the city just glows bright neon on its own. The people living there attribute it to something called Dawn's Light, although no one actually really knows what Dawn's Light is. Some people think it's an epic, some people think it's some kind of god or deity, others think it's just like a weird presence or energy that just kind of exists. No one actually knows, but everyone just, like, prays to it because they don't know what else to do. Regalia can see and hear into water and other liquids, and she can also use it to transport. So if she happens to look into a patch of water near you and she hears you talking smack about her, she can just teleport right in there and body slam you over to the next rooftop. However, the second book does have some problems, like, a lot of them. For one thing, they introduce these two new characters, and the book's like, hey, aren't these new characters cool? And I'm like, I mean, I guess I'm glad they're here, but, like, I don't care about them that much. And then by the end of the book, they die, and I'm supposed to care, but I don't. And the book spends the last, like, 10 chapters really pushing this ship that I really do not like. So I just kind of wanted to murder the entire world by the end of the book, but, like, if you happen to care about that couple, I imagine you wouldn't find those portions nearly as grating as I did. The last book is, in my opinion, the best of the three overall. The city of Ildifia, also known as Atlanta, is floating around and moving around the fractured states. Like, when the main characters find it, it's in Kansas, even though it's Atlanta. Just deal with it. Its main epic, Stormwind, is responsible for the fact that Ildifia produces the most agricultural products out of everywhere in the fractured states. So it's, you know, kind of important. Also, for some reason, the buildings in Ildifia are made out of salt. And, like, once every 7 days, they dissolve and then rebuild themselves due to some never-explained magical force that exists. Once again, this book absolutely detests having to explain things to its audience. It's also worth noting that, unlike most places in this universe, people in Ildifia tend to segregate themselves by race, and I really sort of like that the book went out of its way to address this type of thing. The main and supporting cast in these books is fairly racially diverse, but most of the time they don't really address it. They'll just be like, hey, this is what this character looks like, and then sometimes the character will have an accent matching whatever their nationality is, but, like, that's about it. But in the third book, they have one of the characters who is a person of color be like, hey, before Calamity, people were really worried about race for some reason, but, you know, now that the apocalypse is happening, people are a lot less concerned about that, and I think that's really cool. And it's true, most places in the Reckoner's universe don't care about race at all, at least from what we've seen in the series, except Ildifia, because world building that doesn't exist, because why would we actually want to tell the audience why Ildifia is like this when we could just leave it as a mystery? I see a lot of young adult dystopia and fantasy series write characters that are people of color and then just, like, never address it. Like, they'll have this character be from Brazil, or have this character be from Malaysia, or this character be from the Congo, and then just, like, never address any of the discrimination that that character would realistically face, and the author just kind of hand-waves it by saying, oh, it's sci-fi or fantasy, so I shouldn't have to address it because it's not our world, even in stories like the Reckoner's universe, where it is supposed to be our world, our Earth, that just happened to go to crap. But this series deliberately went out of its way to bring up that sort of thing, and I think that's really cool. Moving on from that, as I mentioned, I do really adore most of the characters in this series. David is kind of a freaking idiot, and it can get painful at times, but he's generally tolerable. He has this weird thing where he's supposedly really bad at metaphors, but the thing is, all the phrases that he supposedly sucks at have either like or as in them. So, you're actually really bad at similes, not metaphors, David. Get it right. Not in my young adult dystopia sci-fi. What even is this series, anyway? Prof, also known as Jonathan Phaedrus, is the leader of the Reckoners. He really likes planning things as much as possible, and it's very evident that he is hiding some kind of secret, but we don't know exactly what. Tia is the group's strategist and researcher. She very rarely participates in actual combat, although she is familiar with how to use guns and other weapons. She just chooses not to most of the time. She and Prof are romantically involved. I kind of assumed that they were married, but I don't know if they ever actually explicitly stated that, so. Cody is this dude who is supposedly Scottish, so he tells a lot of really ridiculous stories about the brave and amazing Scottish people and how they were so courageous and they would fight off anything or whatever, but, like, you would expect him to speak with a Scottish accent, but he doesn't. He speaks with a very thick Southern accent, so he's mostly comic relief, and he is very good at his job. But on a more serious note, Cody used to be a police officer, and he joined the Reckoners because when he joined the force, he made an oath to protect and defend, and he believes that letting epics run around free, murdering innocent people is a violation of that oath. It's also heavily implied that he has some kind of dead girlfriend or wife or something, but like many other things, that's never really explained. It's just kind of mentioned once in the first book and then never brought up again. Abraham is this dude from Canada, presumably Quebec because he has a French accent, and can I just bring up a minor pet peeve for a second? Abraham is always described as having a light French accent. What does that even mean? I mean, I know what a heavy accent is and what it sounds like, but have you ever heard the phrase light accent used before you watched this video or read this book series? Exactly. Anyway, Abraham has a very calming voice and demeanor to him, but he's also ridiculously intimidating because he's very tall and buff and scary, and he's one of my favorite characters. Abraham also has his own dramatic backstory, but, like, it's not really relevant to the main plot of anything, but, like, it doesn't come up until the last book, so I'm just gonna call it a spoiler, even though it's really not, and just move on. There's this guy named Dean Nighthawk who makes technology for the Reckoners. He's kind of similar to Hawkmoth from Miraculous Ladybug because he has a dead wife that he stares at from a glass coffin creepily every day, and he's also very, very sassy. But Dean Nighthawk is paralyzed in most of his body, so he has to use this moving wooden mannequin thing that's powered by telekinesis to move around. It's weird. The best scene in the entire series involves Nighthawk going to make popcorn at like 9 in the morning. And everybody's like, really, dude, popcorn for breakfast? They're like shaming him over this. And to which Nighthawk responds, Look outside that window. What do you see? That's right, the apocalypse. And you know what the apocalypse brings with it? The deterioration of societal norms. Therefore, I am allowed to eat whatever I frickin' want for breakfast, and you can't stop me. Finally, my personal favorite character, Mizzy. She's this overeager, very excited, very bouncy and happy 17-year-old girl, and basically imagine her as like the superpowered being-slaying female version of Tom Holland's Spider-Man. She can often be quite airheaded, so people often tend to underestimate her, but she can still be very serious when she needs to be, and she can still kick butt when she needs to. She can sometimes become a bit superfluous to the plot, but I don't care. I just like Mizzy. Deal with it. When it comes to epics, some of my personal favorites are Obliteration. This guy whose power is literally just to use solar power to charge up and then explode and destroy everything around him. He often quotes Bible verses before he does the explosion thing. So, like, I personally believe that, like, before he got infected by Calamity, he was probably some kind of religious cult leader. So, yeah, he's, like, really terrifying, but, like, also amazing. He walks around wearing a trench coat and carrying a sword. Even though he has no need to, he can just explode whoever is in the immediate vicinity of him, but he still chooses to carry around a sword. He's great. And then there's Larsener, who is basically just King George III, like both the historical figure and the guy from Hamilton. He has the power to take powers away from other epics, so he's amassed so many powers over the years that at this point he can basically do anything. He is an apathetic, spoiled brat who won't do anything to you unless you provoke him first. However, Larsener considers things like refusing to fetch him a drink, breathing, not being an epic, and existing as grounds for murder. So, you know, provoking him is fairly easy to do. So yeah, I like most of the characters in this series. However, there is one character that I hate with the fury of 1,000 Alexander Hamiltons who have just been asked to write down and publish their formal opinions on John Adams. But we'll get to that character in a sec. For now, let's talk about some of the other things that I didn't like. What even is pacing? Okay, admittedly, this is mostly just a complaint about the first book. Things get better in the later books, but whatever. Steelheart functions in back-to-back extremes. David goes to a place and fights an epic in a pretty interesting scene. David talks to people in some of the most excruciatingly boring scenes you will ever read in your life. David fights people. David bores you to death. David fights people. David bores you to death. David fights people. David bores you to death. And then the big finale happens, but by then you're, like, basically comatose, so you can't even enjoy it. The later books do admittedly follow a similar formula, but they at least manage to keep the talking scenes actually interesting, so that I don't feel compelled to skip entire chapters to get to the interesting stuff, which, by the way, I did do that while reading Steelheart, and my understanding of the plot was not damaged at all. I was completely able to understand what was happening. I mean, I don't remember what happened now, but, like, at the time, I understood it. Also, what is explaining things to your audience? But I think I've given enough examples of that by now to the point where we can just move on. Also, just letting you know, spoilers from this point onward, so, like, if you really don't want to be spoiled, I guess stop watching now. With the spoiler warning out of the way, Megan is an obnoxious, annoying, overpowered jerk, and I freaking hate her. Megan is David's love interest in the series, and she subscribes to the tsundere school of romance, meaning that she doesn't like getting close to people, so to try and drive her crush away, she starts verbally abusing him, but the guy keeps trying anyway, so eventually she ends up softening, and they end up getting together, and it's really stupid and annoying and overdone, but, like, it's largely harmless to the plot, so, like, I'm mostly okay with it. Whatever, you kids have fun. However, at the end of the first book, Megan dies. Wait, seriously? I don't have to deal with this stupid, overly contrived subplot anymore? Just kidding! Megan is immortal. I'm not kidding. Every time she dies, she's just reborn. Great! Fantastic! I love that my literal least favorite character in the entire series now literally has to be involved in the rest of the story. That's That's just great! Side note, every single book has at least one moment where David thinks that Megan is dead, only for her to turn out to still be alive. And, like, David, did you just miss the entire ending of the first book? Like, what? Oh, also, apparently Megan is working for Steelheart, and she has, like, the power of illusions to create visions of this dude called Firefight or something, and, like, David's, like, all hurt and betrayed or whatever, and I want to care, but, like, I just don't. In the second book, David meets this new group of Reckoners, and he's like, Megan couldn't possibly be evil. She's just hurt and misunderstood. I don't care that she betrayed me and all of my friends. And then the new group of Reckoners are like, dude, we literally saw her murder one of our closest friends in cold blood. I'm pretty sure she's evil, but David just flat out refuses to believe that Megan is evil, no matter how much evidence was presented to him to contradict this for the entire first half of the book. And due to contrived romantic subplot bullcrap, he ends up being right. However, it turns out that it isn't just enough for Megan to have illusion powers because, you know, that wouldn't make her important to the plot because when have illusions ever come in handy in a superpowered fight? No. It turns out that Megan can't control illusions. She can control the multiverse. I'm not kidding. This is an actual plot twist in the book, and it made me want to just quit reading the entire series, and honestly, I'm not sure why I kept reading after that point. Megan and David just don't have a lot of chemistry together, and it's really frustrating, especially in the first book, because then you don't know that she's an epic. So from the audience's perspective, she's not a girl struggling against an inherent evil force within her that she can't control. She's just rude and obnoxious and that one overplayed stereotype you've seen in, like, every crappy action movie before. So then when you find out she's an epic, you're like, oh, I guess I kind of feel bad for you, but, like, at the same time, I don't like you because when you were first introduced, you were nothing but rude and obnoxious for your entire existence. So, like, I don't care how much you try and backfill that. I'm not gonna care from this point onward. And that's without even addressing all of the weird sexualization of and creepy staring at Megan throughout these books. Yeah. So, when Megan is first introduced, she's wearing a dress that's a bit low cut in the front, and in David's internal monologue, because the story is told from his perspective, there's this line that's like, oh, she's wearing a pretty dress, and that neckline, and I'm just like, ew, I didn't want or need to know if David was looking at that part of her body, thank you very much. I just didn't need to know that. And in the third book, they literally do that exact same thing again. Megan's wearing a low-cut dress, and David's like, and that neckline, ellipses, and I'm just like, oh my god, stop, please. In addition, pretty much every time a description of Megan's clothing is given, the shirt she is wearing will always be described as tight. Like, I don't think she ever wears a single loose shirt in the entire series, and I'm pretty sure that that detail is just there to give more reason for her to be creepily stared at by David. David creepily stares at Megan a lot in this series, and it's, you know, worrisome, but it wouldn't have been nearly as worrisome if the author hadn't tried to justify it. This part made me get very close to just flipping off this entire series and throwing the book out of a window. And the only reason I didn't do that is because the copies of the book that I am reading are not my own. I borrowed them from someone else. So in the second book, there's a part where another girl is, like, walking out of the room away from David. And David kind of spaces out, and he's, like, staring in her general direction, but, like, not at her specifically. But then Megan comes into the room, and from her perspective, it looks like David is staring at the girl. Megan makes some kind of snarky comment that's like, how come every time I see you, you're ogling some other girl? Or whatever. Anyway, remember how the second book is set in the, like, flooded city, the New York, Babylon, whatever the frick it's called. Anyway, so at one point Megan falls into the water by accident, and as you probably know, when people fall into water, sometimes their clothing will stick to their bodies. So David takes advantage of this moment to creepily stare at Megan. Romance? No, it's not romance at all. It's just plain creepy. What publishing company allowed this? Isn't it like Ember or something? Yeah, Ember Publications. Why would you allow that? At first, Megan is rightfully mad at David, but then she's like, oh, it's alright. Earlier, I got mad at you for staring at that other girl, which of course implied that I wanted you to stare at me instead, so I'm totally not gonna get mad at you for staring at my wet body. No, 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 no. This offer did not just try to, what, why would you, he didn't, yeah, I can't, he did not, I refuse to believe. So that was the Reckoner series. Steel Heart is so boring that a thesaurus makes for a more entertaining read. Firefight is okay until its last few chapters when it starts justifying sexual harassment, killing off characters you don't care about, and trying to push the square peg of the David and Megan romantic subplot through the round hole of the overall story. And Calamity is actually pretty good. It's just not worth reading the other two books so that you can actually understand this one. Abby, I'll see you on Friday.